Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Joe Morales. Morales was shot and killed on Thursday, October 22, 2015, at the intersection of West Lexington Avenue and South Park Avenue in Pomona, according to LA County coroner records. Juan Enrique Lopez and James Barden were subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. The murder and attempted murder in this case arose from a car-to-car gang shooting, which shortly followed a gang confrontation near the defendant's home. Defendant is a member of the Ghetto Family Gang in Pomona. A derogatory term for Ghetto Family members used by rival gangs is goldfish or fish. One of Ghetto Family's rival gangs is Raza Unida. The victims in this case were members of Raza Unida. A derogatory term for Raza Unida members is rats. Defendant and his family lived in a house which was adjacent to a local cemetery. Although Ghetto Family members would hang out at defendant's house, neither the house nor the cemetery was in territory claimed by Ghetto Family. The area was not claimed by Raza Unida either, but was traditionally associated with a third unrelated gang. The shooting in this case was in retaliation for a gang conflict which occurred between defendant and other Ghetto Family members who were relaxing in his yard on one side, and on the other side several Raza Unida members who were visiting the nearby cemetery. On October 22, 2015, at around 2 in the afternoon, Ghetto Family members and non-member friends were in defendant's yard drinking and taking drugs. Defendant and one of the others left to go buy more drugs. Those remaining in the yard included James Barden, who would ultimately be charged with defendant, and a young man known only as Carlos. At the same time, Raza Unida member Joe Morales, the murder victim in this case, was at the cemetery to visit his brother's grave. Sometime later, he was joined by fellow Raza Unida member Anthony Torres, the attempted murder victim. Torres had a gun. A third man joined him as well. At some point, the Ghetto Family group in defendant's yard and the Raza Unida group in the cemetery noticed each other. From the yard, Carlos said "fuck rats," jumped over the 5-foot wall separating the yard from the cemetery and started running toward the Raza Unida members. Torres flashed his gun. Carlos froze and ran back to safety in defendant's yard. When defendant and his friend returned from buying drugs, the group in his yard told them what had happened. Defendant and his friend briefly beat up Carlos for jumping over the wall and approaching their rivals. In the cemetery, several more people had joined the Raza Unida group. They were drinking beer. They were taunting the Ghetto Family group, calling them fish and goldfish. Defendant turned to Barden and said, "Let's go get these fools." At defendant's urging, Barden got into the driver's seat of a black SUV. Defendant entered the front passenger seat. The others got into another car to follow. As the Ghetto Family group got into their vehicles, they saw the Raza Unida group getting into theirs, one of which was a silver Altima. Barden believed that he and defendant were on a mission. The SUV was dangerously low on fuel, and Barden suggested they stop at the gas station. Defendant said, "No, let's go get these fools." Defendant, who was carrying a handgun, had the gun out and ready. As Barden drove past the entrance of the cemetery, he didn't see any of the Raza Unida group still there. He knew a spot where Raza Unida members liked to hang out, the home of one of the men who had been at the cemetery. He believed that was the destination of the Raza Unida members who had left. He drove in that direction. As Barden drove, defendant spotted the silver Altima and pointed it out to Barden. The car was about a block ahead, stopped at a red light in the left lane. Barden turned the SUV into the emergency center lane and sped all the way down to where the Altima was stopped. Barden slammed on the brakes, ending up slightly ahead of the Altima. The SUV was in the left turn pocket, so that the SUV's passenger side was adjacent to the driver's side of the Altima. Barden had also turned the SUV slightly into the lane to his right. He had been trying to cut off the Altima. The victim was in the driver's seat of the Altima. Torres was in the passenger seat. The passenger window of the SUV was already down. Defendant was wearing a black bandana covering his face from nose to chin. He leaned his upper body out of the passenger window and fired 2 rounds at the victims. At this point, defendant's gun jammed. He popped back into the SUV and attempted to unjam the gun. Torres returned fire, and once defendant had fixed his jam, bullets flew between the 2 cars. Barden completed the left turn and drove off. As he did, defendant screamed out the window, "Fuck rats, Ghetto Family." The victim had been killed. Torres was not injured, and defendant had been shot in the eye. Defendant was taken to a local hospital. Realizing that defendant's eye injury required a trauma center, which that hospital didn't have, one of the nurses said defendant would have to be transferred to Pomona Valley Hospital. Defendant said, "I'm not going there," and ran out. In the hospital parking lot, two men in a parked car were talking to a hospital employee standing outside the car. Defendant approached and asked him to drive him to the hospital. The employee told defendant that there was an emergency room right behind him. Defendant pulled out a knife, ordered the two men out of the car, and drove off in their car. Initially, defendant and Barden were both charged with the victim's murder and the attempted premeditated murder of Torres. Various firearms and gang enhancements were also alleged. Defendant was also charged with 2 counts of carjacking. Barden entered a plea of guilty to all the charges against him: murder, attempted murder, and accessory, and admitted the enhancements. Barden and the prosecution agreed to a disposition that if Barden testified truthfully in defendant's trial, he could withdraw his plea to murder and attempted murder. Those charges would be dismissed, and he would receive a sentence of 7 years on the accessory and the gang enhancement charges. At trial, Barden testified against defendant, specifically stating that defendant was away when Carlos jumped the cemetery wall. There was a verbal altercation between the two gangs, and he would not have driven after the victims were it not for defendant having asked him to do so. An unaffiliated witness agreed that the passenger in the SUV fired into the Altima before someone in the Altima fired back. Following the trial, the jury found defendant guilty of first-degree murder, including gun enhancements. The jury also found defendant guilty of attempted premeditated murder of Torres, including gun enhancements. With respect to both counts, the jury found true that defendant committed the offense for the benefit of a criminal street gang. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of carjacking with the knife enhancement. Defendant was sentenced as follows: for the murder, a term of 25 years to life, consecutive to a term of 25 years to life for the gun enhancement. For the attempted murder, a term of 15 years to life, consecutive to a term of 20 years for the gun enhancement. For the first carjacking, the high term of 9 years plus 3 years for the knife. For the second carjacking, 1 year, 8 months. All terms were to run consecutively, for a total term of 98 years to life. Joe Morales was 22 years old at the time of death.